My husband and his friends thought it would be funny to leave me stranded in a small Italian village after an argument. Let's see how she gets back. They laughed as they drove away. I didn't come back. A month later, he found me in Greece. I had already started over. Let's see how she gets back, Gabriel mocked, his voice cutting through the afternoon air as he slammed the car door. The taillights of the rental car grew smaller and smaller, disappearing around the bend of that narrow Italian street, leaving only dust and the echo of my husband's friends' laughter. I stood paralyzed, my mouth still open mid-sentence. The argument we were having outside the small cafe suddenly lost all meaning in the face of the unthinkable thing he had just done. He'll come back, I whispered to myself, drawing curious looks from locals dining at tables on the sidewalk. This is just to scare me. But the knot in my stomach tightened more and more as the minutes stretched into an hour, while the sky darkened over that unfamiliar town, one whose name I couldn't even pronounce properly. Before continuing, I want to take a moment to thank you for being part of this journey. If you're drawn to stories of women who find their strength in unexpected places after betrayal, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us share more stories of resilience and rebirth. Now let's see how an abandoned woman turned an act of cruelty into the beginning of her freedom. When I begged Gabriel not to drink so much wine during lunch, I never imagined things would get so out of control. His friends, the typical college buddies celebrating their annual guys' reunion, to which I had been reluctantly invited, encouraged him when I suggested returning to the hotel. "She's always controlling you, man," said Pitt, ordering another round just as I stood up to leave. Gabriel followed me outside, his words slurred but his anger clear. The fight got ugly quickly, with years of resentment surfacing from both sides. "Do you have your passport in your purse?" "No," he mocked before getting into the driver's seat. "Then you'll figure it out. You're so clever, always telling me what to do." Night fell completely as reality hit me. That picturesque Italian village that seemed so charming during the day now appeared threatening. I counted my money. €80 and 37 cents. It wasn't enough for a flight back. It barely covered one night in a cheap accommodation. My credit cards were in Gabriel's wallet. He had insisted on carrying them earlier because my small purse was full. I found the cheapest boarding house, a dirty little room above a bakery, with a narrow bed and a sink in one corner. The elderly lady who showed me the room didn't speak English, but she seemed to understand what was happening to me and gave me comforting pats on the arms. "He blocked me," I whispered in disbelief, looking at my phone. 27 calls to Gabriel, all sent straight to voicemail. The text messages were delivered, but no one responded. I tried Pete, then Marco, and all of Gabriel's friends who were in that car. They had all blocked me. I felt a chill as I realized that this hadn't been an impulse, but a planned humiliation. I slept in fits, waking occasionally hoping to see a call or message, and sinking back into distress. By the next morning, I had convinced myself that this nightmare would end. Gabriel would return with some half-hearted apology, ready to tell me I was overreacting for not understanding his joke. I would be furious, but relieved enough to let it go, to return to our perfectly arranged life in Boston, where he was a respected architect, and I his understanding wife, who had abandoned her own design career to take care of our home and social life. But he didn't come back. By the second day, I started rationing what little I had left. I only bought a panini for lunch while walking around the entire edge of the town looking for any sign of the tourist group in every hotel and restaurant. By dusk, I understood that they had continued their route as if nothing had happened and had gone to Florence without me. On the third day, a cafe owner who noticed that I stood outside his establishment offered me a free espresso and with very broken English gave me directions to the police station. The officer there didn't seem surprised by my story, as if abandoning tourists was something common. But his limited English and my non-existent Italian only left me with a filed report, a compassionate look. That afternoon, I made the most difficult decision of my life. Standing in front of the window of a small, dusty pawn shop, I removed my wedding ring, that 2-carat diamond that Gabriel had given me on our 5th anniversary, replacing the simple band with which we had started. The clerk offered me much less than it was worth, but enough to finance the next step of my journey, whatever it might be. "Call your family," suggested the pawnbroker, counting the euros. I nodded externally, but internally another plan was already forming. Calling my family meant having to give explanations, hearing my mother say, "I told you so," facing Gabriel's temper, seeing friends again who had already noticed the cracks in our marriage, those that I had tried to cover up repeatedly. The bus station was quiet when I arrived, with an electronic screen showing destinations I had only read about in travel magazines. A night bus to Rome that connected with ferries and more buses could take me to places where Gabriel and his friends would never look for me if they ever thought of doing so. My finger trembled over my father's name in the contacts list. One call and he would send me money to return. A single call and I would return to that life I had built, where I had gradually diminished myself to make room for Gabriel's ego and demands. I remembered Gabriel jokingly hiding my folders when I mentioned wanting to return to work in interior design. "Why complicate things?" he had said. "We don't need the money and I need you focused on our life." At that moment I laughed, but sitting in that dirty station I understood that this too was part of the corral he had built around me. "Where are you going?" asked the ticket agent, an elderly lady with kind eyes who had been watching me look at the screen without deciding. "To Greece," I replied, feeling the decision solidify as I said it aloud. "To the farthest coastal town you can send me to." 14 hours later, I got off the last bus of my journey, my body aching from the uncomfortable seats and accumulated tension. I was greeted by the smell of sea and olive groves as I looked at the whitewashed buildings of a town whose name I couldn't pronounce. My cell phone had run out of battery at some point along the way. I had an empty stomach, and the weight of everything they had done to me, or perhaps what I had done myself, weighed on my shoulders. Fatigue clouded my vision as I walked toward what appeared to be the center of town. 3 days of emotional ups and downs had left me in pieces, jumping between rage toward Gabriel and fear of the uncertain future. A strange, unexpected spark of something that dangerously resembled freedom. I had euros left for perhaps 2 more nights in the cheapest place I could find. After that, I had no plan, no friends, no words in the local language beyond please and thank you. But as I watched the sunset paint the Aegean waters gold and pink, I was invaded by a calmness I hadn't felt in years. Gabriel wanted to teach me a lesson about dependence. Unwittingly, what he did was liberate me. The Greek sun fell mercilessly as I moved away from the town. My feet were full of blisters inside impractical sandals, designed only for strolling. My water bottle had been empty for hours, and the mixture of dehydration, hunger, and emotional exhaustion made everything spin around me. Trees with silvery green leaves lined the dusty path, shimmering like coins in the breeze. Olive trees, I thought, just before my knees gave way. The ground came at me suddenly, but I barely felt the impact. Darkness began to invade my vision as a strange calm took over me. Perhaps this was fair. Abandoned by my husband in a foreign country, only to collapse alone in another. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the fatigue that had been dragging me since Gabriel left. "Phosmokira," a female voice broke my stupor, followed by wrinkled hands turning me over. An elderly face appeared before me, with deep wrinkles around kind eyes full of concern. She spoke rapidly in Greek, giving me gentle pats on the cheeks and offering me a canteen. The water gave me enough strength to sit up, though my head was still spinning. She introduced herself as Elena, repeating her name while pointing to herself. I awkwardly imitated her gesture. "Alexis." Elena helped me to my feet. Her body was small but surprisingly strong. While supporting me, she pointed to a stone house among the olive trees and made walking gestures with her fingers. I nodded, without strength to resist, as she slowly guided me up the hill. The kitchen of the house welcomed us with the aroma of herbs hanging from the wooden beams and something savory simmering on an old stove. Elena sat me at a worn wooden table before calling someone. A male voice responded, and seconds later, an older man appeared in the doorway, his face weathered by the sun and sporting a silver mustache, drying his hands with a cloth. "Nikos," said Elena, pointing to him. Her husband nodded cautiously, with eyes that questioned but did not reject. Elena served a glass of cold water and placed it in my hands, followed by a bowl of simple soup. My stomach growled as soon as I smelled it, drawing a smile from Elena. That afternoon passed in awkward attempts at communication. I tried to explain my situation with few words, many gestures, and finally, tears. Elena seemed to understand everything, though I knew it was impossible for her to capture all the details. Nikos remained silent but attentive, asking some questions that Elena translated with gestures. They offered me a guest room, a simple space with whitewashed walls and a narrow bed covered with a handmade quilt. Too exhausted to argue, I fell into the sleep I so desperately needed. Morning arrived with the crowing of roosters and the aroma of freshly baked bread. I found clean clothes folded at the foot of the bed, a cotton dress and a cardigan that seemed from another era, but freshly washed. They were too big for me, but were a relief after my worn travel clothes. In the kitchen, Elena smiled when she saw me and immediately served me strong coffee with fresh bread, olive oil, and honey. With daylight clearing my mind, shame began to settle in. These people had taken me in without asking questions, had fed me, had clothed me. I needed to explain, offer something in return, continue on my way. Using a bit of English and a translation app on my cell phone, which now worked thanks to an adapter Nikos had gotten me, I tried to express my gratitude and my intention to return to town. Elena's face saddened immediately. She shook her head forcefully, pointing outside where rain was beating against the windows, and then to my feet, still covered in blisters. "Stay," she insisted, one of the few English words she knew. "Rest." For the next 3 days, I tried to leave several times. All ended in gentle but firm refusals. Once, with my bag in hand and shoes on, Elena intercepted me at the door with an expression so hurt that I was overwhelmed with guilt. She took my hand and led me to a small wooden box on the shelf. She opened it and took out some photographs. Her fingers trembled as she pointed to a young woman with Elena's eyes and Nikos's smile. "Sophia," she said softly, and then pointed toward Australia. Her eyes filled with tears as she made a gesture as if cradling a baby, and then raised her hand to waist height, indicating a small child. "Grandbaby," she managed to say in English, pointing to a recent photo of a baby. Then I understood. Elena had seen in me a kind of substitute for her absent daughter, a presence that would fill the void she had left. But instead of feeling used, my heart broke for her loss. I slowly nodded and hung my bag back by the door. Each day brought new routines, as gradually I integrated into farm life. Elena taught me to collect eggs without scaring the chickens, to hang clothes so that the mountain breeze would dry them well. Nikos taught me to distinguish weeds from the garden plants. He had all the patience in the world when I pulled up an oregano plant thinking it was a weed. The work was physical, very different from the life I led in Boston, so carefully organized but strangely rewarding. My body, accustomed to air-conditioned gyms and measured routines, complained. At first, new calluses appeared on my hands and pains in muscles I didn't even know I had. It hurt every night, but with each day the pain lessened and my strength increased. More importantly, that constant mental wheel about my abandonment began to quiet, replaced by the simple tasks of the countryside and the effort to learn the language. At night, sitting on the small porch while Elena knitted and Nikos smoked his pipe, I began to feel moments of peace. The betrayal still hurt, but here, surrounded by ancient olive trees and the tranquil rhythm of rural life, it began to feel less like the end of my story and more like an unexpected chapter. 2 weeks after my arrival, Elena sat next to me while we shelled peas from the garden. She studied my face with a thoughtful expression before asking slowly, with her increasingly fluent English, "Home? You won't go home." She made a gesture of leaving with her hand and then pointed toward America. The question hit me head on. Home. That word brought to my mind our elegant apartment in Boston with its designer furniture and perfectly matched decor. But it also brought back Gabriel's control, his help with our finances that left me without my own access, his subtle ways of discouraging me from having friends, his condescending attitude toward my desire to work again. The tears escaped and the words flowed without filter in a language that Elena didn't fully understand, but with emotions that needed no translation. I told her about Gabriel's betrayal, about the years in which I gave up parts of myself just to keep the peace, about the humiliation of being abandoned like worthless baggage in another country. Elena's wrinkled hand rested on mine as I spoke. When I finished, she pointed to her heart, then to the farm around us, and finally to me. The message was that I had a place here if I wanted it. "Work," I said, carefully imitating Nikos as he tended to the olive trees. "I stay. I work." Elena's smile lit up like the dawn over the Aegean. She nodded and squeezed my hand before returning to the peas, as if we had agreed on something as simple as tomorrow's menu, and not a total redirection of my life. My decision to stay marked the beginning of my education in olive farming. The next morning, Elena woke me when there were still stars in the sky. She handed me work clothes and sturdy boots that had belonged to Sophia. Half asleep, I followed her and Nikos to the olive grove, where only the first light of dawn touched the ancient trees. "Elias," said Elena, pointing to the branches loaded with fruit. She showed me the technique of gently combing the branches with wooden rakes so that the olives would fall onto nets spread on the ground. My first attempt ended with a shower of branches and leaves, along with a few olives, which earned me a patient correction from Nikos. By mid-morning, the sun was already burning high above. My shoulders burned from the effort, and my city lady hands had their first blisters. "Boston hands," Elena teased tenderly as she examined my palms. During the lunch break, she disappeared into the house and returned with a homemade ointment that smelled of herbs and beeswax. The relief was instantaneous when I felt it on my irritated skin. "Tomorrow better," she promised. And surprisingly, she was right. Each day was better. I refined my technique, strengthened my body. My hands hardened in a few weeks, I could work alongside them for hours without complaining, feeling proud of the growing mountains of harvested olives. The selection process proved even more demanding than the harvest. Sitting in the shade of a pergola, we sorted the olives by quality, the perfect ones for premium oil, those with slight imperfections for second grade, the damaged ones for making soap. At first, Elena watched me like a hawk, correcting each mistake with gentle pushes. Little by little, her corrections became less frequent, as my eye trained to notice the subtle differences. "You learn quickly," Nikos commented one night, his English improving at the same pace as my rudimentary Greek. It was the biggest compliment he had given me. A warmth expanded in my chest as I felt his approval. My learning didn't stay only in the field. It also extended to Elena's kitchen, a place that initially intimidated me with its total lack of modernity. In Boston, I considered myself a decent cook, capable of following recipes from gourmet magazines for dinners that impressed Gabriel's colleagues. But Elena's kitchen didn't use measuring cups or thermometers, only decades of wisdom passed down from generation to generation. "Look," she would say while kneading bread. I tried to imitate her movements, failing spectacularly. At first, my first breads came out of the stone oven, misshapen, raw inside, or completely burned. "Cheer up," Elena would say, breaking even the most failed ones to taste them. Learning is not wasting. Her acceptance of error seemed revolutionary to me. In my previous life, errors were something to hide, not steps toward mastering something. The simplicity of her meals revealed how processed my American diet was. Here, everything came from her land or nearby farms. Vegetables that still had the heat of the sun, freshly collected eggs, cheese from goats that grazed a few kilometers away. The flavors were alive and clean, needing nothing more than olive oil, lemon, and herbs from Elena's garden. My body changed with this diet and work rhythm. The designer clothes I arrived in began to feel loose, as unnecessary weight disappeared and was replaced by firm muscle. My skin, previously cared for with expensive creams, now glowed with just olive oil, homemade soap, and genuine sweat. When I saw myself in the small bathroom mirror, a stranger looked back at me, more tanned, stronger, somehow more solid, despite weighing less. As my Greek vocabulary grew, Elena and I found more ways to communicate beyond food and work. During breaks at sunset, she would take out her photo albums, showing black and white images of her youth in the village. I was surprised to discover that she had been a teacher before returning to the family olive business after getting married. "You?" she asked, imitating someone typing on a computer. I took out my cell phone and showed her photos of my interior design projects from before the marriage, that career Gabriel had belittled as a mere hobby. Elena studied them with genuine interest, pointing out details she liked and making sounds of admiration. "Beautiful thinking," she said, touching her temple. This validation of my creative work brought tears to my eyes. Such a simple recognition, but something that Gabriel had taken from me over the years. On a rainy afternoon, Elena taught me to knit. Her patience was infinite while I dropped stitches and formed uneven rows. My first complete project was a simple scarf, full of bumps and errors, but made entirely with my hands. I wrapped it around my neck with more pride than I had ever felt wearing the designer cashmeres Gabriel gave me at Christmas. Then came other handmade things. A clay cup I molded guided by Nikos, a woven basket I learned to make with a neighbor. Each object represented hours of learning and connection, loaded with stories that no purchased luxury could offer. My collection grew, while my attachment to material perfection faded, after 3 months of working with no other payment than room and board. One morning, Elena approached with Nikos at her side. They took me to a small building where they pressed and bottled their olive oil. They showed me the modest stock we had produced with our harvest. "Market day," announced Elena, pointing to the calendar. The village market overflowed with farmers and artisans selling their products, while neighbors and some tourists browsed the stalls. Elena and Nikos set up their simple table, arranging bottles of golden oil, olive soaps, and jars of preserved olives. To my surprise, they put me at the front of the stall, encouraging me to speak with customers. My limited Greek and their basic English created moments of confusion and laughter, but sales added up nonstop throughout the day. When the market closed, Elena handed me an envelope with euros. "Your share," she said simply. "Fair work, fair pay." I stood looking at the money, which might cover a single dinner at the restaurants Gabriel and I used to frequent. But that envelope represented something I hadn't had in years. Independence earned through my own effort, without conditions, without hidden expectations of gratitude or submission, just honest compensation for real work. That night, I kept the envelope under my pillow and occasionally touched it to confirm it was real. Throughout a decade of marriage, Gabriel had taken control of our finances to make things easier, leaving me with credit cards linked to accounts he managed. That small pile of euros was my first step toward rebuilding a life that was entirely my own. As I was falling asleep, I realized that I hadn't thought about Gabriel once. During the day at the market, my mind was occupied with phrases in Greek for selling and with pride in what we had accomplished. The space he occupied in my thoughts had decreased, replaced by olive trees, recipes, and the growing certainty that I was capable of much more than he had ever made me believe. The following week, Elena and Nikos invited me to dinner at the tavern in the village square, something that had never happened since my arrival. Dressed in a blouse borrowed from Elena, I felt a nervous tingle as I entered the bustling establishment. The owner, Stavros, greeted the couple with enthusiastic hugs before fixing a curious look on me. "Our American," Elena said proudly in Greek, a phrase I had already learned to recognize. Stavros smiled warmly and led us to what was clearly their usual table, among plates of grilled fish and village wine. Nikos cleared his throat and spoke in careful English. "Alexis, we want to talk business with you." His seriousness took me by surprise. Had I done something wrong? Was it time for me to leave? Elena leaned over the table, gave me a tender pat on the hand, and continued where her husband had left off. "We are old already. 68, 70 years, she said, pointing to herself and then to Nikos. "No children here. Sophia isn't coming back." Nikos nodded seriously. "We think we will retire soon. 2, 3 years. But the olive trees?" He made a broad gesture with his arm. "They're 200 years old. They need young hands." I felt the air catch in my throat. Beginning to understand, Elena smiled with her eyes crinkling at the corners. "You learn fast. Work hard. We teach everything." Then she extended her hands as if offering me something. "The business is yours." I was frozen by this proposal. They barely knew me, a foreigner who had crossed their lives just a few months ago. And yet, there they were, offering me a future I hadn't even dared to imagine. "But I don't know enough," I stammered. "The trees, the pressing, the business." "You learn," Nikos said firmly. "We teach. No rush." That night marked the beginning of my true learning. I was no longer just an extra pair of hands. I became the heir to generations of knowledge. Each morning, Nikos would take me through different sections of the olive grove, explaining how soil variations affected flavors, how to identify early signs of disease, and when to harvest each area to achieve the best oil quality. Elena focused on teaching me the administrative part, a mixture of handwritten accounting books and basic spreadsheets on the computer that her grandson had installed years ago during a visit. Her method was functional, but outdated. I saw an opportunity to contribute something beyond physical work. So, I spent nights updating the systems, creating digital records to facilitate inventory and sales control. "Look," I showed Elena one night how to filter the spreadsheet to see which oil varieties sold best in each market. Her eyes widened as she saw the patterns emerging from the data. "Smart," she nodded with approval. "Boston lady brain, good for business." With her blessing, I began to make small marketing improvements. We updated the handwritten labels on our bottles with information on flavor profiles and pairing suggestions, things I had learned from so many cooking classes. With Elena, I put together a simple brochure explaining our traditional methods to answer questions tourists always asked at our market stall. My constantly improving Greek helped me connect beyond Elena and Nikos' circle. The pharmacist who sold medications to Elena began stopping by our stall for conversations that went beyond commercial. The baker's wife invited me to her weekly coffee meetings with other village women, intimidating at first, but valuable for immersing myself in the language and local customs. Stavros, the tavern owner, became an unexpected ally when he began offering our premium oil at the tables, placing small cards with our new labels prominently. "Good for you, good for me," he explained with a wink when I thanked him. The news spread, and soon 2 other restaurants from neighboring villages contacted us to supply them with oil. 6 months after starting this new life, I attended the baptism of the butcher's granddaughter, my first formal celebration in the village. Standing at the back of the small church, I observed the community ritual with a lump in my throat. The elderly priest noticed my presence, and after the ceremony approached to greet me. He switched to the awkward English he had learned at the seminary in Athens. "You bring new life to the old olive grove," he said with a spark in his eyes. "Good for the village. The young go to Athens, to America. The village needs new blood." His approval seemed to break the last barrier. Invitations began to flow more easily. Onomastic celebrations, spontaneous beach gatherings, even an assembly of the local committee to plan the summer festival. Each event wove another thread in the network of connections that sustained me there. Yana, the weaver who had her stall next to ours at the weekly market, became a special friend. Widowed since young, she was in her 40s, with a sharp humor and a practical vision that reminded me of my college roommate. Our conversations, in my increasingly fluent Greek and her excellent English, ranged from sales strategies to village gossip and even personal reflections. "You never talk about America," she observed one quiet afternoon as we were storing the unsold products. "Do you have family there? Friends?" The question hit me unexpectedly. I had focused so much on building this new life that I had pushed all memories of the previous one to the back of my mind. "My parents died years ago. A few friends." I paused, realizing how Gabriel had gradually isolated me from my support network, always with excuses that my university friends were problematic, that my work colleagues were not trustworthy. Gianna nodded with understanding. "The husband who left you in Italy. You never say his name." "Gabriel," I said. The word sounded strange in my mouth after so many months of silence. "His name is Gabriel, and he never searched for you." Her frankness was refreshing, after so many months of Elena and Nikos's silent delicacy. "I don't know," I admitted. "I haven't checked my phone." I made a vague gesture. I would turn it on occasionally to take photos, but I had stopped using my American email and social networks. With no desire to face what might be there, Yana raised an eyebrow. "Maybe it's time to look. Not for him, for you. To close that door properly." Her words echoed in my head all night. After helping Elena with dinner, I went up to my room and turned on my old phone, connecting to the farm's basic Wi-Fi. I opened my forgotten email account. There were hundreds of unread messages. Scanning the senders, I saw several from old friends with subjects ranging from "How are you?" to "Are you okay?" and then to "Please respond." A wave of shame washed over me. I had disappeared from their lives without warning, just as I had disappeared from Gabriel's. A message from my former design mentor caught my attention. "Job opportunity," the subject said, followed by several more insistent emails. Opening it, I discovered that she had recommended me for a remote consulting position at a sustainable materials company. The last email, dated just 2 weeks ago, said the position was still available if I was still interested. But before I could think about this unexpected bridge to my old life, another sender made my fingers freeze on the screen. Gabriel Davis. Subject: "I know where you are." The sending time indicated it had arrived just a few hours earlier. With my heart racing, I opened it. "Alexis, it took me months and a private investigator, but I finally found you in that lost little village in Greece. This has gone on long enough. I'm going to bring you back and end this ridiculous tantrum. My flight lands in Athens on Thursday. Get ready. See you in 3 days." The room began to spin as panic and anger fought in my chest. How dare he? After abandoning me after months without a word, he now simply intended to come and pick me up as if I were forgotten luggage. I stumbled down the stairs, the phone clutched in my hand. Elena looked up from the account book on the kitchen table. Her smile faded when she saw my face. "Bad news from America?" she gently asked. "Gabriel," I managed to say. "He comes this Thursday." Elena's eyes narrowed. She slipped her hand under the account book and took out an envelope, sliding it to me across the table. "Then he arrives at the right time." I was waiting for the right moment. Inside the envelope, I found legal documents with my name alongside Elena and Nikos's, written in Greek with English translation. "Partnership contract," Elena explained. 1/3 of the business. Years. Not now. Future. Now. Tears blurred my vision as I looked at the document, understanding what it meant. It wasn't just a job or an internship, but a true partnership. It wasn't just a place to stay, but a foundation to build something of my own. It wasn't charity. It was earned recognition. "You choose. What happens Thursday?" Elena said firmly, pointing to the papers. "Here you have home. You have business. You have friends." She pointed to the phone in my hand. "Batman. He no longer decides." The truth of her words wrapped around me like a mantle of certainty. For the first time since being abandoned in that Italian town, I didn't just feel like I was surviving. I felt rooted. Gabriel was coming, yes, but he would find a woman very different from the one he had left behind. The following days passed in a whirlwind of preparation, not the kind Gabriel would have imagined. I didn't pack bags or write farewell letters, but prepared myself emotionally. I went to see Katerina, the only lawyer in the village, who helped me draft divorce papers in Greek and English. I contacted my former design mentor and cautiously accepted the remote consulting opportunity. I even wrote emails to friends I had left behind, briefly explaining what had happened, without excuses or justifications. Thursday dawned with a perfect Greek sky. without a brilliant cloud. I was in the production shed, tasting oil samples with Nikos, when the unfamiliar sound of a rental car broke the calm of the afternoon. Elena appeared at the door with an expression mixing concern and determination. "He's here," she said simply, with my heart beating 1,000 times a minute. I wiped my hands on my work apron and went outside. Gabriel was standing next to a silver sedan, his designer sunglasses on his perfectly arranged haircut, looking with evident displeasure at the humble country house. He wore his typical travel outfit, expensive but casual, well-tailored chino pants and a shirt that probably cost more than a week's earnings from the oil. He didn't see me immediately, which gave me precious seconds to center myself. That man who had once been the center of my world now seemed smaller, less solid in front of the ancient olive trees and stone walls that I now called home. Gabriel. I called him with a voice more serene than I had expected. He turned, and the surprise on his face was almost comical. His eyes traveled over my work boots, my sun-tanned arms, and stopped at my hair tied in a simple bun. I saw how incredulity fought with recognition on his face. "My God!" "Alexis, what happened to you?" That familiar critical tone that would have once made me run to correct whatever didn't please him. Now it simply slid off like a wave against a rock. "Life happened," I replied, walking toward him with a firm step. "What are you doing here?" Gabriel removed his glasses, his rehearsed charm falling into place as he extended his arms. "I've come to take you home, of course. This has gone on long enough. Whatever you were trying to prove—" "This isn't about proving anything," I interrupted him, stopping well out of his reach. "It's about building a life." His smile faltered. Behind me, I heard the soft steps of Elena and Nikos coming out of the house. Although they didn't understand our words, they positioned themselves in view like silent guardians, ready to intervene if necessary. Gabriel noticed them, and his expression hardened. "Are these the people you've been staying with? Have they been keeping you here against your will?" "They've been teaching me," I cut in, "about olive cultivation, about community, about kindness without conditions." I pointed to the trees around us. "I'm now a co-owner. I have a business here." His face filled with disbelief, quickly followed by the condescension I knew so well. "A business? Alexis, please. You're a designer, not a peasant. What is this? Some kind of phase? Eat, pray, love? After our fight, I admit I shouldn't have left you in Italy. It was a stupid, drunken mistake. I've apologized. It's time to come back." "You've apologized?" I repeated, incredulous. "When? In what universe does tracking me down and demanding I return count as an apology?" He clenched his jaw, his charm evaporating. "All right. I'm sorry for leaving you in Italy. It was immature and it was wrong. Is that what you wanted to hear? Can we put this behind us? Why did you look for me, Gabriel? Months have passed. Why now?" He moved uncomfortably, glancing at the elderly couple watching us. "Can we talk in private? In the car, perhaps?" English translation. "They don't understand English, and I have nothing to hide from them. Why now?" Her shoulders dropped slightly. "Your godparents have been calling friends, asking questions at events, clients asking why you're not home when they show up. It looks bad for your image." I finished for him. "It damages your reputation." "Our reputation," he corrected sharply. "Our life together." "The one you built," I replied. "The one where I gradually became just another accessory to your success. Tell me, Gabriel, did you ever notice how unhappy I was before Italy? Did you care?" His expression darkened. "We had a good life, Alexis. A beautiful home, financial stability, respect in the community. What more could you want? Purpose, connection, freedom to make my own decisions." I pointed to the stone cottage behind me. "Here I found all of that. In this place you consider primitive. This isn't you," he insisted, desperation seeping into his voice. "The Alexis I know wouldn't choose physical labor and poverty over comfort." "You're right," I smiled. "The Alexis you knew wouldn't do that. But that woman died in Italy the day her husband abandoned her. Like a cruel joke. The woman standing before you has made different choices." Then Elena approached, placing something in my hand. The partnership agreement we had signed. Although she didn't understand our words, she sensed the moment had come. I handed it to Gabriel. I had roots here now, a business, a life based on respect. He became furious, calling it ridiculous. Calmly, I also gave him the divorce papers I had already filed. "You left me," I said. "You never thought I would flourish." He threatened to make me regret it. I chose freedom. Nikos placed a firm hand on my shoulder and said it was time for Gabriel to leave. As he drove away in his rental car, I turned back to my house, my life. He tried to break me, but in doing so gave me freedom.